Well, February 24th today, my little sister's birthday, one of my little sister's birthdays. Happy birthday, Debbie. A couple days ago was my youngest grandson's birthday. I got two granddaughters that are younger than him, but he was the youngest grandson. He just turned 10 years old. Well, anyway, happy birthday, Zeke. I'm going to go ahead and do some powder coating. I've got these pieces here ready to go. These are the ones that I had up in the basement the other day. These are the bearing housings for the main shaft, for the main saw shaft. This is the lower bearing housing for the edger shaft. And of course then this is a movable bearing, and it goes on here. This is for the movable edger shaft. This spacer goes on the main saw blade, on the main shaft. And then we've got, this is the upper bearing here for the edger shaft. This is a spacer that goes on the main blade. This is the tapered plug that goes in on the edger shaft, that goes in and tightens up the main pulley on the edger shaft. That's all cleaned up and ready to go. I got the broken off bolt out of that, and everything's all cleaned up, polished up, and ready to go. I'm just going to powder coat the inside of it and this flange right here. And we got a couple of flanges. This pinion gear in this shaft is all polished up and ready to go. So I'll just tape that off and powder coat the pinion gear. I'm not sure what this shaft is, but I'm going to tape it off and just powder coat the end of it there. And then this is the driver. This goes up against the main pulley block, and that's one that I may build a new one on. I'm still not sure, but anyway, it's ready to be powder coated, so I'm going to go ahead and powder coat it with all the rest of this stuff. Now, some of these pieces are cast iron. These housings for the bearings are cast iron, and cast iron is pretty porous, so it can absorb all kinds of contaminants, especially grease and oil and stuff. And then all of these parts have had grease and oil on them that can penetrate the pores, and I've washed them and got them pretty clean, so they should be pretty good. But I went ahead and stuck them in the oven for a little while to cook out any impurities in this cast iron, and I just put all the other pieces in there too. So they've all cooked at over 220 degrees or something like that, which should cook out any impurities. I just took them out of the oven, and so I've got to wait for them to cool off, and then I can tape up like inside of these bearings here on where the bearing inserts go. I don't want that powder coated here. I don't want the shafts powder coated here that the bearings go on. And this bearing here, the inside of it, this cage here, I don't want it powder coated. This thing can be totally powder coated inside and out. And then this, just the pinion gear gets powder coated on it, and the same with this. This shaft doesn't get powder coated, but I can powder coat the drive portion of it. So anyway, I'm going to let those cool off for a little while until I can handle them, and then it's a matter of washing them down with some prep sol. Meanwhile, the weather. We get to talk about the weather. So it's February 24th, which is winter in most of the North American continent, and it's still winter here. We had all that cold weather here a couple weeks ago. Used the snow and banked the cabin there, which kept us warm in the cabin during that period of time. And then the weather broke and it warmed up, and it got up into the 40s. The wind blew, it rained. Of course, all the snow almost all disappeared. We got all the snow that I banked up around the cabin is all gone, and it looked like spring was well on its way. Hey, Zen. Hey, Zen. You want to go up to the basement? Huh? Yeah? Yeah? What do you want? Huh? What do you want, Haji? Oh, Haji boy. There's my boys. So anyway, it's been warm. We've had some windy weather, 30, 40 mile an hour winds and stuff around here, and some heavy rain. We've had a little bit of snow off and on. So most of the snow disappeared in the rain. Well, today we got more snow. It's last 2 hours we've got about 4 inches of snow here, and it's blowing 25, 30 miles an hour. It's supposed to blow up to 40, 45 miles an hour with gusts to 60. It's actually supposed to be heavy rain and warm, but so far it's cold and it's snowing. Like I said, the ground was bare out here 2 hours ago. So we'll see what happens. The little bit of snow that we have had, it's been too warm to try to plow it because the ground all got mushy here, the driveway, and it would have just made a mess. So, and it turned out that it just warmed up and melted all off, but now we're back to snow again. Anyway, if this storm is anything like the weather forecast says it's going to be, and we get snow instead of rain, we'll probably get about 4 feet of snow. And I know he's kind of hoping that most of the winter would be over. But again, it's only February, and it's just kind of the start of the winter here. So, I got these pieces all powder coated. This thing looks a whole lot better now than it did. It's still got pits in it, but you can't see them hardly anymore. Well, maybe I won't build a new one. It's nice and shiny. Anyway, it looks pretty good. Oh, this is that pinion gear. And the tapered sleeve, the edger slider, the edger blade bushing. This is the main bushing there, the big bushing, and the second spacer, or I guess this is a spacer, not a bushing. But anyhow, they look a lot better than they did. That's for sure. This is a bearing housing for the adjustable edger blade and the main bearing housings. I think they all look pretty good. I get the inserts in these, the bearing inserts in these, and these will be ready to go back on. To start, I had to put most of the rest of the pieces back in the sandblasting cabinet. They got some flash rust on them. They sat out here so long in the damp that they started rusting again, so I just lightly go over those with the edge sandblasting, and then bring them out, clean them up a few at a time like this, and powder coat them, and while they're freshly clean. Well, all the pillow block bearings are all together. Got the new bearing inserts in them. They're as good as new. Maybe better. Anyway, those two are for the main shaft. This is for the edger shaft, the lower one, and this is for the upper edger shaft. This one is for the movable edger shaft. I've got to get that pressed in. I'll have to take that over to the press and press that in. So that one's not quite done yet. But they look a heck of a lot better than they did. Another batch of cookies fresh out of the oven. These parts, this big shiv here, the multiple one that goes on the edger blade, and then all these other different parts. You got the gear that runs the carriage back and forth here that the chain attaches to, and big rollers, and a few other odds and ends. I'd sandblasted all these parts and had them out on the bench for a few days, and then I kind of got behind and didn't get them worked on. And so typical of something that's been freshly sandblasted, especially in this country where it's so damp, they kind of got some rust on them, some flash rust on them. So I had to put everything back in the sandblasting cabinet again and just go over them lightly, clean them up, and I got those all cleaned up, and then I stuck them in the oven overnight. I stuck them, I didn't intend to stick them in the oven overnight, but I got busy doing some other things, and by the time I got ready to work on them, it was dark out here, and you can't see the powder coat in the dark hard enough doing it in the daylight. So anyway, I had them in the oven. The reason I put them in the oven is some of these pieces, like this big shiv here, this big pulley here, and some of the others are cast iron. And castings, cast metal has a lot of porosity in it, and it winds up outgassing. You get a lot of contamination in it and stuff, and when it heats up, it all comes out. So I heat those up ahead of time, and then I'll take them back in, cool them off, and take them back in and wash them with prep salt again, and get them, make sure they're clean, get any crud that comes out of them done. But then the other thing that happens is castings, again, they're porous, and even if they don't have any contaminants in them to come out, when you powder coat them and stick them in the oven to heat them up, the pores in there start outgassing, and you wind up getting blisters and stuff in your parts. Cast aluminum is really bad about that. Cast magnesium, things like that. Cast iron, not quite so bad. Well, anyway, I still preheat those cast parts before I paint them. And what I wound up doing on all of these parts is I'll hang them up out here. I'll wash them with the Prep-Sol, hang them up out here, and then I take the torch and go over them. And that dries all the Prep-Sol off of them and preheats the parts a little bit, gets all the moisture off of them, because they wind up getting condensation on them. You can't see it until you heat the part up, and then you can see the dampness evaporating off of them. So anyway, I heat the parts up, and that way they take the powder a little bit better. Some of these parts are really hard to get powder into. Looks like I did a pretty good job on these, but like down in these V grooves here and these pulleys, it's really hard to get a good coat of powder in there. And then some of these things, like this part here where this, I think that's called a loveless gear or loveless coupling. Anyway, where that coupling is and those sharp edges there, it's hard to get the powder down in all of those indentations and stuff in there. Like around these pulleys here where the flanges are in them, where the flange meets the roller portion. It's kind of hard to get those coated. They always wind up being thin. So if I preheat them, then it goes in there a lot better. Well, I got another batch of parts just freshly out of the sandblasting cabinet. I'll get those cleaned up and hookup wires put on them. And then meanwhile, these will cool off enough to where I can handle them and get them taken off of this oven rack. And then we could do another batch. The last of all the little stuff is painted up. This is the stuff that I can put in the regular oven. We got just a kitchen range and oven out here that I do a lot of the powder coating in. And this is the extent of what I can fit in that. I could get this in there, but it hangs down awful low close to the burners. If I hung it up like this, it'd fit in there. But the rest of the parts are all too long or need to be repaired. So this is the last of everything powder coated. That's easy to do. Well, I'll take this stuff up to the basement with the rest of it and put it in storage for now. Some of the stuff we can start putting back together. Like I said, there's still some things that need to be done. I'll have to get the big powder coat oven, the one I built for my airplane parts. I'll have to get it going to do the rest of those parts and make some kind of a rack for them in there.